Welcome back to the Lords of Lore podcast. I'm Matt.
I'm Luka.
And I'm Cam.
Hi, Cam. Welcome back.
Hi. Happy to be here.
If people didn't see, we made Cam an official Lord of Lore.
Hell yeah.
Because they have guested on all of our shows. Well, by the end of the month, you will have. Because Cam and I are doing a review of Kith and Kin, the Critical Role book. So look out for that. Rumination. But also check out every Saturday afternoon. You can find our review of the latest Wheel of Time episode or episodes. So check those out. And what else am I missing? We're going to do a rumination on Dune as well, probably towards the end of the month or maybe early in the new year. I just want to say I'm probably only like 30 or 40 pages into Dune, and I love it. And it almost feels like Wheel of Time is like Lord of the Rings and Dune like together.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. Like just the one power is very similar to like the voice type of thing. I don't know. Anyways, I will throw it over to you now, Luka. For Luka's Litany of Literature. What do you have for us today?
Well, what I'd like to talk about is something that's bothering me in the world of cinema, and that is the mediocrity of the movies that have come out. And this discussion is prompted by two different things. One is Dune being as amazing as it was, and it's like, wow, when was the last time I saw a movie this good in theaters? Like, it's been years. And two, Matt, it's something that you said after you watched Shang-Chi. And you came onto this show. Actually, I don't remember if you recorded this or not, and you said Shang-Chi was a very good fantasy movie, right?
Yes.
I watched it. It's okay.
Okay.
It was, I was disappointed. I won't lie. It felt very much like just another Marvel movie. And that just made me think like, yeah, that's what we get now. We get Marvel movies, and that's pretty much it. Like we get Netflix making like literally 50 to 60 movies a year that are all utterly mediocre. And it feels to me like the more of these mediocre movies get made, the lower the bar is for what a good movie is. And all of a sudden we're talking about like these like very much B minus movies as, I don't know, like art somehow. And I don't know if I'm just being a jaded hater or like, I want to see what you guys think of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Star Wars 789, like that kind of stuff, like this, like the ending of Game of Thrones, every single Netflix movie that's come out. Like, have you guys seen Army of Thieves or like Army of the Dead? Like,
I saw Army of the Dead, yeah.
Like that was not remotely close to a good movie. To me, like it was, and then I've heard Army of Thieves is like almost worse. So I don't.
Dang, really?
It just, I feel like we're getting so many average, mediocre movies that the bar is just being lowered and lowered and lowered.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, sorry, go ahead, Cam.
I've heard like a lot because I've heard a lot of people talk about this as well. How like Netflix is just kind of pumping out movie after movie after movie kind of thing. And honestly, I heard something saying that Netflix is focusing more on second screen movies and like programs kind of thing like that. So it's like shows and movies that you can like have your phone out like scrolling through like your Instagram feed and stuff while also like watching this movie. So I think that might be like kind of why a lot of movies are like falling flat.
That is honestly, I'd never heard that, and that is exactly how it feels. Like when you give your full attention to it, you're like, what the hell? Like this is a waste of my time. Why am I watching this?
So I think, Luka, it might be a little bit of both in terms of whether you're jaded or if things are really bad. I think there's a lot of films that are if there's like a Venn diagram of Luka, and there's jaded and these films are legitimately bad. I think maybe like a tenth of the films that come out fall into that middle category of, or no, sorry, let me rephrase that. I'd say like 90% of films that come out fall into like, this is pretty bad, and maybe like 95 fall into like the middle. You know what I mean? But I do think like, obviously, like you're not a huge fan of the Marvel universe, and this episode of Lords of Lore might be a little tough for you because part of my topic will have to do with that. But my thing is like, I think almost we take the Marvel Cinematic Universe for granted, because when I think about it, like I'm obviously like a big comic book fan, and if we're being like honest, in the course of film history, not only is this like a once in a lifetime thing that's happening and setting the bar moving forward, but also we gotta like, this is the best adaptation probably ever made of any source material. Like I'd throw Lord of the Rings in the same conversation, but I don't know if there's ever been a property that's been adapted as well and been critically and community loved and appreciated and successful financially, critically. Like by all metrics, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is the most successful film franchise of all time. And I don't think you get that by putting out mediocrity. Now, I will say, especially with the Marvel TV shows, the early Netflix ones, awful. Daredevil, first 2 seasons, the first season was great. Second season, everything past that is complete mediocrity. But I will say, Marvel does feel formulaic at times, and it feels like, okay, we have this character, it appeals to this demographic, it'll bring in this demographic, put out the movie. But I do think that takes away from all the hard work that goes into like the actors really giving their all to those roles, the writers who write a script that, even though like you might not feel drawn to it, you're like, oh, this is a Marvel movie. This is, all these things make sense and play into like this bigger, larger universe. I don't know if you could stamp mediocrity on setting up a 25 film franchise that's still expanding and going into the silver screen. Like for me, you don't get that sort of success from mediocrity. You do get it from, appealing to the widest demographic you possibly can, and making things inclusive for, a wider audience. But I don't think, like, maybe the stories, some of them feel like they're hitting the same beats, but they're comic book, adaptations. All comic books have that.
Okay, so I agree with a lot of things you said. For one, what are they adapting? Like comic books, you have like 19 different starts to the Spider-Man story. Like how many versions of this story are there? Like any movie they make is an adaptation because it doesn't matter, because it's a multiverse. Like
yes,
anything they make is a valid representation of the source material, because it's just, there is no source material. It's just a character that has webs coming out of his wrists. Like that's the character.
But okay, but then would you say God of War is not an adaptation of Norse mythology?
What do you mean?
Like if God of War doesn't follow the same exact story as regular Norse mythology, right? It adapts it changes it. It puts it into a new medium and tells a different story by changing characters, but it uses all the things that someone who's familiar with that would recognize.
Right, but are you really comparing the mythology of an entire culture over hundreds of years to comic books?
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Honestly, yeah.
I know, but like, I don't see the comparison.
At least the stories. Yeah.
Like if you're saying it's the most successful source material adaptation, like there's only one Lord of the Rings. There's only one, like the Wheel of Time series. There's only one set of Game of Thrones books. There's thousands and thousands of just Spider-Man stories.
Yeah.
So like in that sense, I don't think like it's, what are they adapting? Like they're making their own story. I don't know that it's the best source material adaptation that's ever been made. I would say that would probably be Lord of the Rings as of now. Maybe Dune will take that. But like right now, so I'm looking at all of the Marvel movies that have come out, and like I'm trying to think of like a moment that was like, wow, like that was just like, that this movie stuck with me for like long time, and I like none of them.
I mean, honestly, like, and I don't mean this to take away from your point here, like that makes me sad because I feel like there are so many good moments in those movies that stick with me.
There are, but like I can't, like I'm looking at all of them right now, and I can't remember like a moment I was like, yes, I remember seeing this movie and like that was insane. Like I feel like every single one is just like, okay, this is a Marvel movie.
Like not even like Infinity War or like Endgame at all?
I mean, like
just
for example, Loki's death
big,
was pretty.
spikes.
Was like, wow, he just broke Loki's neck until there's like erase that in the next movie, so it means nothing. Like,
they didn't. Yeah. He doesn't come back actually.
Yeah, he does. He has a whole show. Like,
well, see, you gotta. I'll actually my segment today, spoilers, is gonna be about Loki.
Oh wow,
the character and the show, but it's not the same Loki that gets his neck snapped. It's like I'll get into it.
It doesn't matter. Like it that moment loses all of its weight when I see the exact same actor playing the exact same character again in the very next movie, and now he has a TV show. I don't like it, you've lost me there. Like that moment loses all of its weight. Like if he's not gone forever, like what is the point of that moment? It was just like oh, you feel emotion, but we don't want to lose the character. Like we're going to give him one of those non-permanent deaths. Like they do to literally every single character they have.
But this comic books.
I know, and that's the thing. Like
at the end of the day, comic books are the nerd soap opera where it's people are dying, always coming back, depending on who's writing, depending on who's doing everything. I forget who said it, but it was like, I think it was actually Stan Lee who had said it. It was like honestly, whoever like wins in a fight between like hero A or hero B, it's the writer. The writer wins because it's up to him. He gets to decide. They get to decide who takes that win, kind of thing. So it's very much just like, because there are so many writers like coming at all of this source material and everything, like it's getting handed off like by this person to this person to this person. I think that's kind of like why comic books in general like feel kind of like there's that monotony to it. But yeah, there's definitely like the outliers in comics, at least I find. And same with the movies. Like I recently saw Eternals. I think that was a really cool film that they did like interesting things. I don't know if you guys have seen it yet, so I won't like spoil anything because it's pretty yeah, like interesting. Like for me, coming from like a like semi-religious upbringing, like it hit like a lot of like religious trauma kind of points throughout the film, which I found that felt very different from like a Marvel movie. So I think that's why that movie has stuck with me, at least. So yeah, I don't know. At least with Marvel films, I'm pretty big fan of.
And you know what the other thing is, what you said, Matt, we take them for granted. I actually almost feel the opposite. I'm a little bit disappointed that this exists because it is so successful. And because every single film studio is like, wow, look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Look at the billions that they're making. Let's do the same thing. And it's just like everybody does it so badly.
But but that's what I mean though, is like Marvel has done it right, and it's not just because
what they've done is lowered the bar for creativity all around, because like everybody's like, let's just make a cinematic universe of whatever.
But look how many cinematic universes have failed, right? Because it's not just that Marvel did it first, it's that they did it right.
They did it kind of, they like set up individual characters, then brought them together, and they're probably going to do it again. Like they're going to start making individual movies and do another collaborative movie. But like, it's kind of like, I'm getting very tired of it, and I'm sick of seeing 25 superhero movies come out every year. And that's where all the funding for film is going. And it's like, where is like a cool movie that does something other than, here's a superhero, here's a villain with the exact same powers, guess who wins at the end? Like, oh, I wonder.
Yeah, I can understand that. I think like when we talk about things like Dune, right? Obviously, like it's a different type of movie that I think maybe it has some crossover audiences like us, like myself. Whereas like I'm into Dune for the sci-fi aspects, but also like the philosophical questions and the questions it asks about society. Whereas you're not getting as much of that in Marvel films, but there still is element, like every writer who's wrote for Marvel, there's obviously story beats you have to hit so that it's a Marvel movie. But also like when you talk about
exactly my point.
Yeah, but when you talk about things like Black Panther, like Shang-Chi, where like these films are important not only because they serve a purpose in this film universe, but also like outwards, like in the real world, like this is like representation, and we're telling stories of people who really exist in the real world type of thing. I think those stories are just as important. Whereas Dune, like I understand why Dune's important, and I love all the reasons that like the philosophical questions Dune forces you to ask yourself. Things like Blade Runner as well fit into that category for me. But I just like you can't deny that like not everybody wants to go see Blade Runner or wants to go see Dune. Do I agree with those people? No. I wish more people enjoyed them. But it's just the reality of it, right? Like it's easier to sell people on Iron Man. And I guess the funny thing about the Marvel Cinematic Universe too is to go see Avengers, that takes so much buy-in. You got to watch 20 movies, and people do. Like I'd say like the percentage of people who went into that movie without previously having seen the majority or all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is probably like 20% or lower. I'm just guessing. But I would guess like it's probably around that number because like you want to know what's happening. It's like Cam, you said, like it's a soap opera basically at this point.
Yeah.
And I don't think that makes it inherently bad, but I do think it brings along with it the formulaic approach that can get sort of.
It just with the fact that it's what's dominating all box office. Every single major studio is like, let's make the Marvel movies. And it's like, we've seen those movies. Marvel's made 30 of them and they're all pretty much the same. Like they're all like, I'm not saying they're all like, none of them are bad movies. That's the thing. Like they're not bad. Like Shang-Chi wasn't a bad movie. It was just a little underwhelming, you know? It was just like, okay, I've seen this movie. Like sure, now it's like the 10 rings instead of with like very ambiguous powers. Like it's kind of cool. Special effects are good. Actors are great. Music is great. Like it's always like Marvel's always good in those. Special effects always great. Music is always solid. The actors are always charismatic. They're good. Like I enjoy all those aspects. I've seen this movie. Like take a risk, you know, like you already made your billions. Like how many hundreds of billions has Marvel made? Like take one risk, make one sort of out there movie. Like just like, I don't know, break the mold a little.
Yeah, I think what they consider risk is so much less risky than what we might consider, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Like, so, I think for them, a risk was like Black Panther. And I like it hurts for me to say that because I know why they think that, and it's not okay. But like, you know, or Shang-Chi to them would probably be a risk as well. But
so was Black Widow for the same
for the same reasons. Exactly, yeah. And you know, you see like not Shang-Chi or Black Panther, but like the sort of vitriol that something like Black Widow gets met with. Like I understand as a business why they don't, but I feel like you're saying, Luka, when you have that much power and that much success, you sort of need to take risks because then you run into like getting too predictable or like generic.
Like Disney can afford the L of one movie that like doesn't really perform to the $1.5 billion like box office level, you know?
Yeah.
It's like
they did. It's called Solo.
Yeah. Man, I like Solo.
I love Solo.
Ooh, I hated that movie.
Yeah, but also like talking about risks, like Blade Runner 2049, huge risk, $200 million movie that we know of, probably more. $11 million opening weekend. That's a career ender in most cases.
Yeah.
Denis Villeneuve comes with, you know, Denis Villeneuve, but even that failure was so much so that they didn't greenlight a second Dune movie until, you know, a week or so after the first one had released. Like, that's a major setback. The company who made that movie is like still struggling, if they haven't folded already. Like,
I mean, yeah, but that was like a very good example of a terrible marketing campaign that just like buried a movie by not promoting it.
I think that's another big thing as to why we're not seeing very many like actual like films. Like I know that when Dune came out, I think Timothée Chalamet had like another movie come out like in the same weekend, and I saw no advertising for anything like that. And maybe it's just like my algorithm on like Instagram or whatever is just like pumping me full of like what's Marvel sending out next kind of thing, or like it's just like I don't get enough of that like advertising for like actual movies. Not that these movies aren't actual movies, but you know what I mean.
I think especially when we're talking about fantasy and sci-fi, those have to be big budget movies. It's so hard to do those movies and for them to turn out good when it's a lower budget. And so when you talk about things like independent studios who are taking like super big risks with movies all the time, they can't really tell those stories because it's like even like something like The Green Knight, like that's a huge risk of a movie and gets critically like flamed. like, or at least by audiences, gets flamed for being like too hard to comprehend or like, too slow. And it's like, well, then, studios aren't going to take more risks with movies like that or telling that type of story because it's like, it didn't work,
That's exactly. I'm just lamenting the fact that
yeah,
this is what works. Like, this is what makes the billions. And I mean, it's not, there's no bad Marvel movies. That's the thing. They're all in that nice medium. Like, the best Marvel movies are like B pluses, like the worst are like,
I don't know about that.
C pluses. I mean, which one would you call like a 9 out of 10 Marvel movie?
For me, I put Black Panther in that category. And then,
but why? Like,
because it's important to
exactly.
Yeah,
not because it's a good movie,
but also because it's a good movie. I think it's well acted. I think the story is perfect. But
well, perfect. It was not remotely close to perfect. Like,
what? I don't know. I would, to me, I would put it in a 9 out of 10. I would also put Endgame in that same category as well. Just the spectacle of it, I think, is probably one of the greatest films ever made. Not in a
it was cool special
philosophical effects, change my outlook on the world, but just like
it was a cool movie experience, no question.
Yeah.
I mean, they're doing that's what they're doing now. They're even for the new Spider-Man. How many villains have they announced? 7 or 8 already? Like,
yeah.
See, that's where the budget is going.
And that's like, again, because they're comic book movies, that's a comic book approach. How do we get more people to buy this comic? We tell them that there's 6 characters showing up. It's a crossover event of the universe. There's a crossover event every like 4 years in comic books, and it's been that way since like the 70s. Like, and we're getting it on film now. So like,
maybe the moral of the story is I just don't care about comics books at all. Like,
and you even said, like, I can't remember what episode we were talking about this, but like, because there's a multiverse, like, you're not really into multiverses. You like,
no, I like a story.
You should watch Loki. You should watch it. Anyways,
that'll do it for me and my rant on the mediocrity of cinema.
You know what I want, Luka? I want you to, like, at the end of the year, compile a list of movies that you think break the mold in that sort of way.
Okay. Yeah. Movies that have stuck with me that I was like, all right, that's a good movie. I'll make a list for you.
I think it'd be fun.
Speaking of like the Marvel movies and everything like that, and kind of how mediocre they are, I've been watching the Hawkeye series on Disney Plus, which I'm gonna say I came into it with very high expectations, so maybe that was on me, because I love the comic that it is based off of, the Hawkeye My Life is a Weapon comic by Matt Fraction with art by David Aja. And that comic is so fantastic, and it literally just follows the plot line of what does Hawkeye do when he's not with the Avengers saving the world. And it's so good because it's like picking up like after Hawkeye has gone through like this like really messy divorce and everything like that, and it's full of heart and like comedy and just like fantastic moments, and like the art as well is phenomenal. Like, it has this cool like 70s like pop art kind of stylization to it, and it's so good. And when I was seeing the advertising for the show, I was very excited because it had a lot of like similarities to that art from the comics. But Marvel Studios has not like given credit or paid David Aja for like any of this like his what's it called, like likenesses kind of thing, like that. And that's pretty friggin' scummy in my eyes. So when I had heard that, I was like, oh, okay, a little bit of chip in my expectations. And then also just the fact that it's Jeremy Renner playing Clint Barton still, to go off the thing that Luka had said, where they're really good at casting very charismatic people. In some cases. Not all. So, yeah. So at time of recording, the first 3 episodes have been released on Disney Plus, and I will say the first 2 episodes were rough to get through. It follows kind of loosely the same stylization. It focuses on Haley Steinfeld's character of Kate Bishop, who in the comics becomes this younger Hawkeye who is really cool. I really enjoy her in the comics, and I love Haley Steinfeld as an actor, and she's acting her ass off in this show. Like, it feels like it's her show, like almost so much that like the opening title sequence in the first episode showcases her growth into like who she is, and it's set around Christmas time, and so it's nice, has like that holiday festive cheer to it. And then you got Jeremy Renner, who is just a blank board, just stone faced the entire time, looking like he's cashing that paycheck and gonna go like do whatever
app.
Yeah, and his shady exploits. God,
his
yeah.
app is just like social media where only he can post. It's wild.
Yeah, it's Jeremy Renner's Instagram, but only Jeremy Renner.
But locked behind a paywall.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh my God, yeah. So
anyway,
yeah, he's just wooden, and like coming from reading the comic where that Hawkeye is so charismatic and funny and like caring about everyone, and like having this Clint Barton where he only cares about his family and not even like the lives of like people that he has endangered when he was running around as Ronin, like for the 5 years, just kind of going like kind of on like a racist manhunt, just like taking down the Japanese Yakuza. They touch on that like slightly, where like he's at like a Japanese restaurant with his family, and like the owner is like, "Hey, thanks for this, like your dinner's on us," and he's like, "Oh," and like you see him like guilty because he's an asshole. But yeah, it's just and there's a sequence in, I think it's the second episode, where he's trying to get this, like, the whole story is they're on the hunt for the Ronin costume because Haley Steinfeld, Kate Bishop, is being followed by this Russian mob kind of thing, because she wore this the Ronin costume. So it's now tied to her, so they're after her. So at one point there's this LARPing like episode kind of thing where I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be fun. And it's just Jeremy Renner kind of making fun of nerds the entire time, just going like, what? They're so violent. And it's just, it's rough the entire time. And
oh man.
Yeah. So yeah, this leads me to my question for you guys. It's, when has something like that you were really looking forward to that like had source material beforehand, like led into this other adaptation that like failed to meet your expectations, kind of thing? Like other than Game of Thrones, because like I feel like that almost doesn't count just because the books didn't end. So
yeah,
it didn't really have that source material to like base it on.
I agree. Game of Thrones was great when it had source material.
Exactly.
It was like the best show on TV when it had source material.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard to say because, like, honestly, like, there's been very few things that I've read or known about before I went in. Obviously, I talked about Black Panther before, but like the Black Panther Marvel Knights run by Christopher Priest, but then also Black Panther Marvel Knights animated series were like two of my favorite things in all of comic book history. And I felt like the movie did them justice. Like they weren't one-to-one adaptations, but there were similarities and like characters that you recognize, or like were, you know, represented in different ways that I thought was like perfect. I can't remember going into something and being like, wow, they really screwed that up. There's been things where I'm like, I wish they hadn't have done that. Like say something like Logan, right? We sort of get told that it's going to be like an old man Logan, and it very much was. It was excellent fucking film, but it wasn't old man Logan. So I was a little bit disappointed. I guess it's wrong to say I was disappointed by that movie because I wasn't in the slightest, but I just wish there was also an old man Logan, maybe like an animated movie or something. But yeah, I don't know. I'll try to think of something.
For me, Aragon came out when I was in elementary, I think. I had read the book. I think at that point, the third book was either being released or had just been released. And I had read everything that had been up and out until then. And like I still vividly remember like the day that I was supposed to go to the theater and I got sick and I couldn't go with my cousin. And then like I waited till it came out on video on demand and I watched it. And it was like the first movie that I hated in my life because I was a kid until that point. So like every movie was, cool. And then this was the first time when I was like, I watched every single moment that happened in the movie. I was like, that's not like in the books. This is awful. Like, why did they do this? This is not the book. Like, this is not the book that I read. What is this? So that was just, I don't have one thing that I remember from that movie that I was like, yes, this is how I imagined it while reading the book, except for maybe how the dragon looked. Like the CGI was pretty good.
Okay.
At least to my elementary school mind back then.
That's fair.
And then the second one that I had read that a movie came out was the Percy Jackson movie. I don't know if you guys read that series. I read it in like elementary, junior high. One of those like YA fantasy novels based on Greek mythology. It was pretty good. It was like an enjoyable book series. I think like 6 books. Again, the movie just like did not care about the source material. And then there was another one that I didn't watch because I knew just from watching the trailer that it was going to be utter garbage. It was Artemis Fowl. That was a book that I read again, like in elementary, I think. And I saw the trailer and I was like, that's not even like, that doesn't even begin to feel like how the book felt. So I'm not even going to waste my time with it. And guess what? It was like a 7% on Rotten Tomatoes or something like that. Like it was awful. It's like one of the worst movies of all time. Just terrible movie.
Yeah, that was like early 2020, right?
Yeah,
it came out. I think it was one of the first Disney Plus films to come out on Disney
direct to Disney Plus. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So the obvious one I missed is The Hobbit. Fucking hell.
Yeah.
That was massively disappointing. But you know what's the thing is like it wasn't immediately after the first film. I was like, man, I'm in.
Yeah,
and then it was fucking off a cliff.
It was the second movie for me it was honestly that female elf character and like that whole sequence that was annoying, and then the river one, when they escaped like down the river in the barrels, I was like,
what's her name, that woman,
the actress?
No, the actress is like Elizabeth Banks, I think, but I can't remember what her character is, but not even like, she honestly was like, she's a great actress. She acts fine in the movies. It's just the character's awful. Like I don't know, it made no sense. There's no, I don't know what the fuck they were thinking. But while you were speaking, I was sort of reminded of video game movies, which have all been bad. Every single one.
Yes.
So any one of those, one that was massively disappointing to me honestly, take this with a grain of salt because I haven't seen it because I heard it was so bad that I didn't bother seeing it because I knew I would be upset. Was Assassin's Creed? With Michael Fassbender.
I didn't see it.
I just heard, I think it had a 17% on Rotten Tomatoes when I was like, should I see this movie? And then I was like, no, I'll just keep my love of Assassin's Creed tucked in 2009 where it belongs. And Warcraft wasn't great. It was fine though.
Oh yeah, I
forgot about that. Was one of those like C+ movies, you know?
Yeah, just so average.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
there was nothing that you like stuck with the performances, and I wanted to like it because I mean, World of Warcraft is cool, and I like Travis Fimmel, I think, like the main
from Vikings, right?
From Vikings, yeah, he was so good in Vikings, and I wanted to like this movie, but it just was not it.
Yeah.
The Hitman movies were all not that great. I don't know if you guys have seen those or played
No.
the games.
No,
They're,
I've seen someone play the game, but I've never actually watched one of those movies.
Yeah, not great. It's not a terrible adaptation. The Witcher was pretty good. The Witcher was pretty good, actually. I did not dislike anything from The Witcher, really.
So do you define that as a video game adaptation or as a book adaptation?
That was a book adaptation.
Okay.
Because it directly adapted the first two books.
Okay.
Like it directly adapted the short stories in the first two books. But it also had problems. I feel like Netflix can't be trusted. Like just in general. Having seen The Wheel of Time, I think Amazon might be okay. But
see, for me, like I understand. Sorry, go back to like Luka's thing, but
no, that's okay.
I understand why some Netflix series are mediocre or substandard.
Mm-hmm.
I get it because like they're pumping them out at such a rate that's all you don't have time to make things great.
Yeah.
But also there's so little pressure because they're putting hundreds of things out each year that this series, like you let this writer and this directors and this team have creative freedom. There's no way these things should be turning out poorly. Like you're able to take risks. It's a Netflix series. No one fucking cares.
Yeah.
Like there's 18 other ones coming out in the next few months. Like if this one flops, like they're going to be okay. But it's weird to me that they don't take risks with those. But I would even say that Amazon, I don't know if I've watched too many of the original series, but the ones I've seen thus far, like I've really enjoyed Invincible. It's a great adaptation. Well, I shouldn't say adaptation. It was very enjoyable to watch. I haven't read the originals, so I can't say it's an adaptation. But
it is an adaptation. It's not like an Amazon original.
Yeah, and The Boys was great as well. So yeah, I feel like Amazon has swung less, so they've missed less. But I don't know if Netflix can't be trusted. I don't know if I'd say that just yet, but it definitely like it's less like, oh, it's getting a Netflix series. I'm not like, oh, it's gonna be great.
It just there's something about the term Netflix series that just screams it could be very average.
Yeah,
you know, like when you just hear it's like a Netflix original, like
yeah,
you know, that's like, what's a good Netflix original?
Stranger Things.
Yeah,
it's true.
But like even that, like by season 3, it was kind of like, okay.
Yeah, milking it kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. When they announced that they're doing this newer season, I was
Are they on
like,
4?
oh, really?
Is like 4 is coming out now? Season 4 is supposed to come out?
4 is coming out,
yeah. So they did the same thing where like they killed dude and then he's in the trailer. Like what's his face? Like the old dude.
Oh, don't tell I haven't finished. Oh, no.
I mean spoilers. Shit.
Okay. One more I forgot. I was just looking at my books to the left of me. Spiderwick Chronicles, massively disappointing. But I have heard that they are making a new adaptation. I wonder if it's on Netflix. I think it might be. Or
It'll
I think
be,
it was on Disney Plus.
Disney Plus. Yeah.
So that's
same with
exciting.
The Percy Jackson.
Oh, they're getting remade
Percy
as
Jackson's
well?
getting a TV series as well.
Wow.
Right, I did see that Percy Jackson and the writer is included in the creative process. And you see another one, Avatar is on Netflix, and the creative team that made the Avatar left. They're like, we can't work with Netflix. Netflix can't be trusted. They cannot be trusted. Like
I can't say you're wrong.
even the showrunner of The Witcher, she had never read the books. Like,
oh damn.
You know, like they don't. I feel like, Netflix can't be trusted. I stand by that.
Yeah.
We'll see this Witcher season 2, but
yeah. See, but that's the thing is I don't have any reverence for the source material of The Witcher. Like I know it's like highly regarded. I know people love the game. I've neither read the series nor played the game.
Yeah.
So I just went into like, this is a really sweet fantasy series.
Yeah.
Which is the same way I went into Wheel of Time and I'm really enjoying it. But fucking anytime I post something on our page about Wheel of Time, I fucking comments blow up or I get a direct message being like, fucking they took our jobs. every time.
Damn.
Yeah, so it's like I'm like, man, that sucks. I think it's really good. You know. Wait, I wanted to ask. Sorry, Cam.
Yeah, no worries.
Go back to the second here. Was there ever a time where you watched something and somebody told you, no, the source material is much better, or they fucked it up, but you really enjoyed it? Have you ever experienced that same thing?
Yeah, with The Hobbit, actually.
No, get out.
Yeah. I've not read The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit or anything like that. And I went into The Hobbit blind and I had a really good time with most of it. I totally
Even the
agree
third
that
movie?
the third movie, which one was that one?
I mean, if you haven't read it, that was probably the funnest one of all. Like,
yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah. And yeah, when Luka was saying like the river scene was trash, I was like, oh man,
that was a good time.
Oh no.
No, but I absolutely get it. I also like completely understand that they did not need to make it a 3 or a trilogy as well. Like I see it for what it was, but I also see it for how like y'all see it, like just like, oh, this is kind of a bastardization of something that I grew up with. So like I completely get that, but I still had a good time.
But what's messed up is Peter Jackson made that. Like,
it's complicated.
No, I know it's the studio. You can
tough.
see the studio's hands in it, but
yeah. What about you, Luka?
Where I've like somebody's been like, yeah, the source material was better, but I actually enjoyed the movie itself.
Right.
Honestly, I don't know that that's ever happened. I mean, like the Wheel of Time, I'm loving the show. Like I'm really excited for the show. I've seen people be like, oh, like this was changed. I mean, I don't care because I haven't read it.
Exactly.
You know, like, and that's the thing though. Like that's with The Witcher too. It's like you haven't read, you haven't played the games, you don't care. It's like it's just a good show. Like you take it at face value, and like maybe that's a better way to take it. But then it's like, who did you make it for?
Right. Yeah.
Like,
Did you adapt this because you thought this was a property that could appeal to a lot of people, or did you look at this audience and say this would be a successful audience to market a show towards? Like it's a weird, but I guess like you could say the same thing with Game of Thrones. Like, did you make it for the book fans, or did you make it because you knew the story was good and a lot of people would gravitate towards it on screen? And it's hard to know.
Yeah.
You know. One I'll throw is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I fucking adore that movie. And then like, you know, when it was like 10 years later, right, when it was like on lists of the worst adaptations ever. And I'm like, wait, what?
I've seen that. Yep. It's a good one. I love that movie too. And I haven't read the book. And I have the book.
Yeah.
I bought the book, never read it.
Me too.
I read the first book. I loved it, but I loved it because I loved the movie and I like contextualized everything
right
through that. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Good
Conversation. Oh yeah. No, yeah. Hawkeye. I mean, I did just before recording this, I did watch the 3rd episode. It's getting better. They've introduced a really dope character, Echo, who they've already announced is getting her own spin-off series. And she is a
Luka. Shaking his head.
No, I get it. But honestly, I think that's going to be pretty good. She is a deaf indigenous amputee actress. Cool. And she is fantastic in it. Like she is very good. And she has some ties with some big Marvel names as well. It's seeming like
cool
in the show. Yeah. And it'll be interesting, I think.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that. I wanted to say like the spinoffs, just as you said that, Cam, I was thinking like maybe, I guess, I won't speak for you, Luka, but maybe the thing about Marvel is that because there's so much of it, it feels like you need to consume it all if you want to be up to date. And like you were saying, some of it is, you know, substandard, that it feels like consuming it all might be a burden at sometimes. Like for me, I went into Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
Cam, you know how I feel about this. I was going off in a group chat the other day. I wanted to love it so much because I thought it was like in the same vein of Black Panther, important to me. I think some of the messages they were trying to tell or trying to get across were really important ones and ones I agreed with, but I just couldn't get past how terrible I thought the acting was and how much of a mess I thought the script was. But like, I watched it all. I had these feelings after the first episode and was like, fuck, like, is this going to get better? And it didn't.
Yeah.
But I had to consume it because I need to know,
Absolutely.
for the next one, it's like watching Iron Man 2. It's like, I don't want to, but like, if I'm doing the Marvel marathon, I have to.
Yeah, it's in there.
I think maybe the lesson to take away is that Marvel is like this umbrella thing now. It's become so big that maybe you just pick and choose.
Oh yeah.
That,
it's definitely becoming a chore. Like, I completely get that. Like, I have that superhero fatigue like constantly, but it's like, oh, if I don't watch this, I'm going to be out of the loop of like what everyone is talking about kind of thing. So.
Spoiler alert, guys, you're not out of the loop. They're super predictable movies. You can just watch the next one. They'll explain it. Like, they'll tell you what happened. I didn't watch Captain Marvel. I didn't watch Black Widow. I didn't watch Civil War, I think. I didn't watch...
Oh, damn. Civil War.
I haven't seen any of the Marvel TV shows.
Well, do you feel like maybe then like some of your appreciation to like those ensemble movies is lost because like you're like, oh, Spider-Man showed up, whatever?
No, I don't. Well, I mean, like I've seen all the Iron Mans, Thors, the Hulks, the Spider-Mans, all the Captain Americas. What else is there? Like of the main Marvel movies, I haven't seen Captain Marvel, which has nothing to do with the rest of the story. I haven't seen Black Widow, which is a prequel, and that's it, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I watched Civil War, but not before all of them. But like the Avengers, like I loved the Avengers, but that was like the first time they did that, and I was like, wow, it's like all of them in the same movie. And it's like I don't get that feeling anymore. It's like, okay, they're all in each other's movies now. Like they're all in all the movies.
I get what you're saying, but I totally had that feeling watching Endgame. Like that last battle.
Sure, the last battle was like crazy cool. That was very, very cool. But if that's what we're building towards every 7 years, I'm not very happy that that's what we're getting all the time.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's even with all the rumors and speculation of like this next Spider-Man movie. I'm like,
oh yeah, I have like zero interest. I'll watch it, but
like, yeah, it just feels like it's going to be a lot. And it's not going to appease anyone.
It's funny. I saw a thing being like, "Hey, remember the last time they tried to like jam a bunch of like villains into a Spider-Man movie, like Spider-Man 3,
Amazing Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3? It never ends well. I think this one they have because of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think they have more.
Oh, and dude, the whole setup, like I can't. It's like, why is there a multiverse now? Because Peter Parker didn't want, like, why would he even agree to like cast that spell just because he was like, oh, can we like not have people know that I'm Spider-Man? Like, that's it. That's the reason.
No, you gotta watch Loki, man.
Yeah, man.
Gotta. It's actually okay. So I'm gonna.
It's a great segue. No, absolutely.
So I'm gonna clear up. Sort of alleviate some of this tension here with my segment, which is going to be about Marvel. But specifically, I want to talk about Loki, not just the Marvel character, Loki in general, our own planet's mythology, Norse mythology, other adaptations of Loki, stuff like that.
Nice.
But I want to say, when I start to talk spoilers for Loki, I will mention that. So if anyone hasn't seen it, they can mute or whatever.
Cool. I haven't seen it, but you can spoil it all.
I figured as
no
much.
Worries.
So okay, real quick though, when we talk about
Loki's
Disney Plus, when we talk about Disney Plus shows, WandaVision to me was great television, not even just great Marvel, great adaptation. It was just that was so excellent and so well done. And the serial nature of it and the weekly releases just created such like a buzz around it. But I was sort of more into the movie community when that was coming out. So I was more of aware of what people were saying about it. And since then, I've sort of stepped away from those sort of communities, just because like I don't have enough energy to spend speculating about movies as much anymore, especially ones I don't really care about. So I was sort of still into that when that happened. It was fun to sort of like, oh, what's going to happen next type of thing. But Loki's a show that came out months ago now, and I had no interest in watching because I was very much where you were, Luka. Like, man, he just died and they brought him back. Like, I didn't understand what it was going to be. But I was bored. I threw the first episode on just to see what it was like and loved it. And the reason why I loved it is because I've been reading so much Norse mythology or Norse inspired writings recently that the Loki character has like, I just can't get enough of it. Like this self-sabotaging, narcissistic, just, can't care about other people to save his own hide type of thing. He's so ingrained with who he is, and he can't change, and he won't change because he feels like it's his free will to be as shitty as he is. And so there was a lot of things in the Loki series that reminded me of how this character is set up in the original Norse mythology. So shapeshifter, deceiver, trickster, backbiter, inventor of lies, known as sometimes. Sometimes he's a Jotun, like a frost giant. Other times he's, the adopted son of Odin, like in Marvel, or just, part god and part Jotun, Laufey. I can't remember. Laufey is the goddess said to be an Acer, and then I can't remember what his dad's name is.
It's been a while.
Whatever. But so part giant, part god. We see obviously in the Marvel universe he's Odin's like adopted son. So Thor's I don't know what you would call that, adopted brother. But in Norse mythology he was the blood brother of Odin, which means they swore some sort of blood oath, or Odin took him into what's it called? Asgard. Yeah. And he sort of lived amongst the Acer gods and caused nothing but trouble for them in his own Loki way. I wanted to bring up this book, which, Luka, you've heard me talk about a lot. This is The Witch's Heart, Genevieve Gornichek. Highly recommend, 10 out of 10. Lords of Lore Masterclass stamp. Maybe one day we'll talk about this on Ruminations. But this is just a book I picked up because I thought the cover was cool. And in this cover, we can see Angrboda, who's the main character, the wife of Loki in some stories, a witch of the Ironwood, Jotun, and her own strange sort of origin, not being part of, the Nine Realms, coming from somewhere else. Odin feared her and destroyed her after learning everything he could from her, because Odin's the fucking worst, absolute piece of shit. Which is cool when he gets painted as Loki's father, because Odin is just as conniving and deceitful and malicious and mischievous. He just gets to be the god of everything, and people sort of forget that. Odin's the worst. In her hair, we can see Jormungandr, her son, Hela, her daughter, and Fenrir, her other son. I've also been reading The Ring Legends of Tolkien by David Day. This is honestly just a beautiful book, leather bound. I bought the whole set that has the dictionary of Tolkien, the atlas of Tolkien, blah, 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 hobbits, heroes of Tolkien. So these are the things that really got me. It was God of War who really put me on the path of Norse mythology. But then these books were what really started unraveling some of the stories for me, which is why when I watched Loki, a few of my friends weren't as into it as I was, but there were so many things to me that pointed back towards the original origin and mythology of Loki that I thought it was so brilliant. Now, that could be me reading way too much into it, but I think it's interesting still that when you get this character in a different sort of environment or adaptation, as he is in Marvel, it's still like the things that happen to him are still similar, even if they're intended to be or not, because this type of character brings these sort of things upon themselves. So I want to talk a little bit about that. There's a quote from the show. He says, "I crave attention because I'm a narcissist, and I suppose it's because I'm scared of being alone," which is almost identical. I couldn't find the exact quote to something he says in The Witch's Heart. I do these things because I feel lonely up there, and this forces people to pay attention to me. Paraphrasing, but so we see like this fatal character flaw of being an outsider, and instead of trying to fit in, just makes trouble for everyone who would otherwise probably accept him in order to get some form of attention. That's why I love it. The ultimate self-sabotager, complete and utter narcissist who can't reasonably make peace with caring for others. He can't wrap his head around his feelings for other people, so he self-sabotages over and over again. I won't spoil what happens in this book, but it's, telling the story of Ragnarok through the eyes of someone who's sort of a part of, but also removed from Norse mythology. It's very beautiful. Cried after reading it because the ending will just get you. So here's some of the things that the Marvel series, which is fantastic in its own right. And Luka, I think would answer a lot of your questions about Spider-Man in the Marvel universe moving forward, or a retrospective look at why things happened in the Marvel universe. What does it get right? So there's a concept in the show called the sacred timeline, where everything that's happened has happened for a reason, and it's been overseen by avoiding spoilers as much as I can. And just a warning, if you're listening or watching, this is where some of the spoilers might come up. Organization called the TVA, and above them, this group of 3 lizard alien things called the Timekeepers, who maintain this sacred timeline and make sure everything goes according to how it's supposed to. There used to be a bunch of timelines, and it got too chaotic, and they made this one sacred timeline. Anytime someone steps outside of that sacred timeline, they get labeled as a variant, and things happen to them. So that's the story of Loki. That's the setup. That's why Loki's still alive in this spin-off series, is because when the Avengers go back in time, he gets the cosmic cube and teleports himself. Therefore, straying from the natural order of the timeline, and gets labeled as a variant. And they have to deal with him, this TVA entity. But there is a person, this is big spoilers. There's a person called the One Who Remains, who's even above the Timekeepers. And they are sort of, I'll try to avoid who that is, but they are overseeing everything. The Timekeepers aren't real. The TVA is being lied to, but this person, that is their goal, is to maintain this timeline. And make sure everything processes from the start of time to the end of time. This is Odin. This serves as like the proxy of Odin in this story of Loki, because Odin, as we know, the foreseer of Ragnarok, with the powers he learned from Angrboda to predict and see the future, is making sure that everything happens to lead up into Ragnarok. And then after, we know that Loki, or if you don't know, Loki kills Balder, which sort of starts the events of Ragnarok. He kills him by telling his brother, whose name I forget, who's blind, to shoot a mistletoe and points it at Balder, killing Balder, who can only be harmed by mistletoe. But there's things that sort of imply in the poetic and prose edda that Odin was aware that this was going to happen, or at least could foresee this happening, and let it happen, or didn't do anything to intervene. So there is that sort of, and the reason why Balder has to die is because Balder serves a purpose after Ragnarok, which creates the new world. The old gods had to die for the new world to rise, sort of in its ashes. And Balder leads that new age of people, which start our world. So it's the One Who Remains, again, I'm trying to avoid spoilers, gets to a certain point where there's a similar thing that happens. And that's all I'll say. So the One Who Remains serves as Odin. Thought that was a cool parallel. Also, the One Who Remains explains that they made this timeline because when things were super chaotic, it was bad. But the reason why things became intertwined with those timelines is because the One Who Remains found a way to travel between realities, between different multiverses. Again, similar to Odin, who learned how to travel along the Yijiso, the life tree, into different realms, connecting all the realms together and then ruling over them. So I thought that was a cool way it related as well. There's a point in Norse mythology where Loki is forced to be bound after killing Balder with a snake that drips into his eyes. This was sort of similar to in this show. He gets forced to relive this very painful memory over and over and over again. And it's only in this memory where he admits to himself he's a narcissist and he's lonely, which is cool. Again, him being a variant, also sort of like him being the outsider among the Acer. Now, again, spoilers, there's a character named Sylvie, who we learn is another variant of Loki at a different point of the timeline, which is really cool because it sort of implies that Loki as a being, as a soul, as a person, is a gender fluid person. And so, at any point in the timeline, he might, appear as whatever gender they're feeling. I said he, but they. Anyways, and so these two Lokis come sort of face to face with each other. Okay, so sorry, I'm weaving a bunch of different paths here, so ride with me. But him falling in love, to me, with this variant of himself, which he does in the series, obviously playing into that he's a narcissist and he'll always be alone, but alone means with yourself, and this is another version of yourself, so maybe he's not truly alone, and everything he's done has sort of pushed him to this path. So even though he does push people away and he'll always be alone sort of means with this person you love, in his twisted way, which is the only Loki way of finding someone you love, is by pushing everyone else away and finding yourself. But also in Norse mythology, there's a story of Loki eating a witch's heart, or this evil woman's heart, and as he eats it, it unleashes all the evil in the world, and this is why some people are bad. So this is like a fragmented story that never really gets expanded on. It's just in one retelling of Norse mythology. I'm not quite sure. I don't think it's in the Prose or Poetic Edda, but that shows up at the beginning of this book, where Loki comes to Angrboda, who's had her heart ripped out and burned 3 times. This is like the first sentences of the book, so no spoilers here. But Loki returns her heart to her, which is sort of like this, weird metaphorical way that could only happen in Norse mythology, of someone literally giving you their heart, or your heart back. But so Sylvie and Loki here sort of reminded me of that, him taking on the heart of somebody else and becoming something universe ending, unleashing all the bad into the universe. And if you've seen the end of the Loki show, you'll know what I mean. The origins of Loki's name comes from loop or knot, because Loki is actually credited with inventing the fishing net. So that's interesting. And one of the first conversations Loki has in this series is him telling somebody he's going to gut them like a fish, and then having to explain to that person what a fish is, which I thought was really cool. And at one point, after he makes the fishing net, he gets caught by the Acer gods. He turns into a salmon to escape them, and burns his fishing net, and then jumps into the pool and becomes a salmon. But somebody sees on the ground the burning, and the outlay of the fishing net is able to replicate it, and then they use that net to catch Loki. So it's like him being his own worst enemy. And even his sort of mischievous machinations come back to bite him in the ass. There is a character called Utgard Loki in Norse mythology, and Loki name can, again, relating to knot and loop and fishing net, can be translated into entangler. So Utgard Loki. So Loki's less of a name, actually, but more of a title, the entangler. And Utgard Loki is the entangler of the Outyards. Again, relating back to this show, is that we eventually get to a whole group of Lokis who are in this outer sort of place of time, at the very edge of time, which keeps on expanding type of thing. And there's different versions of himself there that he has to come in conflict with, as he does in Norse mythology. Then the last concept I wanted to talk about is free will. So my interpretation of this came from The Witch's Heart, where the main character Angrboda, she can also see into the future and the prophecy of Ragnarok, and so she sees everything that plays out up until Ragnarok, and Loki never wants to hear it because he wants to keep his free will intact. His choices and his actions are his own, and no magic or prophecy can influence what he does, which is the exact same concept in the series where there's this, the one who remains, who says everything is happening according to how I foresaw it happening. I have it all written down here. You can see everything you've ever said. And it's like, what? And then he writes that down too. It's like, but this concept of like, I refuse to believe this because I have my own free will, even though the evidence is here. And that sort of character trait comes back up in original Norse mythology of Loki rejecting any sort of prophetic visions of Ragnarok. All this to say, I fucking love the character of Loki. I thought Marvel did an excellent job of translating Norse mythology and the character flaws of Loki into a modern sort of take on this concept of multiverses, and set up the next phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe excellently. So Luka, when you were saying earlier in the show, like, you're getting tired of the same approach Marvel's had, it's a show like this where I was feeling very much the same way you were. I wasn't like Shang-Chi, I just saw sort of like I wouldn't have gone to see it otherwise. It was like I went with a group, and that's the movie we saw. Falcon and Winter Soldier I watched months after it came out. WandaVision I watched as it was coming out, but sort of after that I lost all excitement. I haven't seen Black Widow. I'll see Eternals when it comes out on DVD. I have no intentions to see it in the theater. After Endgame, my interest in the Marvel Cinematic Universe waned, like right off a cliff. WandaVision peaked it for a second, and then it went immediately back down. And now I've come to Loki, and it's all the way back up again. I think, like, not only am I like wanting to reread The Witch's Heart because it's just such a cool retelling of Ragnarok, everything Loki I'm trying to consume, because this character died, and I was like, this character is one of the best characters, man, and I'm sad to see him go, but it was time. And now I'm like, no, hold the phone. Like, I want Loki in everything again, because it's not the same Loki we saw die in Endgame. It's the Loki we saw get defeated at the end of the first Avengers. And there's a really cool scene where he comes face to face with like the Infinity Gems, and I can't remember what it was, but there's a moment, and it's acted so well, where you just see like how powerless he looks, and the realization that nothing he does actually matters as he sees his life sort of play out, and sees him dying at Thanos' hands. Also, all the variant Lokis in the show were fucking incredible. Richard E. Gere from Rise of Skywalker's in here, and oh my god, he's like a Loki who survived the Thanos attack and went and played God on a planet for a few hundred years, I think, and then he got lonely. He got lonely again and self-sabotaged and revealed himself, and that's when he got caught as a variant. I don't know. I thought everything about this show, glorious purpose, it's fucking incredible. I'm glad I waited so I could binge it all, because I watched it all in one night, because I watched the first episode and was immediately hooked. So I've been fucking ranting for 20 minutes. You guys have thoughts on the God of Mischief?
I think it really helps because Tom Hiddleston adores playing that character. And I think he was like an executive producer on the show as well. So I think that really helps with like how well he knows this character. So he's able to like throw in like the small things that you like a super fan would like notice, kind of thing, of just being like, oh, this could easily tie into like actual Norse mythology and stuff like that. Because like a lot of those stuff that just like kind of flew over my head, because I only know Loki as like the casual like Norse fan, Marvel fan kind of thing, like with God of War and like small Norse myths. But yeah, I think that is a testament to it, of just like Tom Hiddleston loves playing this character. Tom Hiddleston loves this character. He wants to see this character go far. So I think that's how the success of the show kind of happened, even with some of the flaws that I have with the show.
What are your things about the show?
My main gripe with the show is the fact that he does fall in love with the like variant of himself, but it's not because of like it's like, oh, it's like self-love kind of thing like that. It's very much because now that they have like officially like said that Loki is queer, that is a big like, oh, what's that called, stereotype of gender fluid folk, that they would just sleep with the opposite like assigned gender that they are, and that's why they become gender fluid. So I think it's a little bit dangerous in that way, but I also understand that it is supposed to be a larger metaphor of it. But a lot of people will just kind of look at that and be like, so this kind of confirms that theory. Yeah, that's my main thing.
Yeah, to me it sucks because obviously like that's problematic as fuck. But it for me it sucks because it's like it sucks that they weren't aware of that prior to and didn't have something in place to, not fall into that stereotype. Because otherwise, I think like if they were chose to be aware, because it was a choice not to address something like that, which was a wrong choice. But had they been aware, they could have made this, for me at least, flawless. Because I remember speaking to you a couple days ago about that and was like, oh yeah, that does sort of change my perspective on that relationship specifically.
Definitely.
And it's just like, a repeated thing of like Hollywood and big studios like Disney, like trying to be inclusive.
Yeah.
You can't, I said this when I talked about gender last week, you can't be inclusive if you're not including the people you're trying to represent in that representation.
Exactly.
Like, you can't tell me how to best represent me. I'll tell you. So yeah, it sucks that they missed the mark there. Luka, any thoughts about the God of Mischief, your feelings?
Like as a character, I don't know Loki from many things. I mean, honestly, my first introduction to Loki as a character was Thor, like the Marvel movie. I might see the show, like you speaking so highly of it. I would be willing to check it out. The reason I didn't watch it was one reason, it was multiverse. Like that's the only reason I didn't watch Loki the show. It was the only like Marvel show that I'd heard of that I was like kind of intrigued by. But there is a great adaptation of Loki in the oh my god, what's his name? There's a fantasy book.
Neil Gaiman?
It's the Red Queen's War trilogy by Mark Lawrence.
Right.
And like that book just as a setup as like a cool idea where like humanity destroyed itself with like modern technology, but one of the last things we created was like essentially like some kind of pseudo large hadron collider type machine that essentially made magic possible in the real world. And then like some of the people who created that, when their physical bodies died, their spirits survived into that machine, and then their spirits got trapped into the mythology and stories of the people that came after. So there's like a legitimate like Loki, and like the entire Norse mythology exists in reality being created by this machine fueled by the imagination of the humans that came after. Wow. So like that's just like a really, really cool way of doing it. And I love that Loki character, even though he barely ever comes up. Essentially like the entire Red Queen's trilogy has like, they're all looking for Loki's key, which is like a key that just unlocks any door. You just like point it at a lock and it just like opens for you. So like that's a really cool adaptation of the character. And as a character, I love like that kind of mischievous sort of troublemaking character. That's just like always a classic trope. And honestly, Loki was one of my favorite Marvel characters of all. Maybe maybe even my favorite. Like I can't think of another character that was like so instantly charismatic. Like Thor took a while to grow him. Like Thor in the first movie is like not that. It was like okay. Like it takes a bit.
Yeah, it's typical
Felt
like
a bit
fish
generic.
out of water. Yeah.
Whereas like Loki was like an interesting character almost from that first movie.
Right.
So maybe I've just been so like oversaturated with Marvel. I didn't even want to give it a chance, but maybe I should, like I might come off as I don't hate Marvel. Like I don't hate this stuff.
You don't have the stance that you have for Netflix for Marvel. I get it.
It's like I don't like instantly dismiss any Marvel because I've seen 95% of it, except for the TV shows. So I will give Loki a chance. That I promise. I will watch Loki. I will see what it's about. You've made me interested. And the other thing, I saw a meme of it, or like just a clip of it, where like a dude that had like a bunch of Infinity Stones, and he's like we have a bunch of them. I'm like, multiverse jokes. Like I'm not.
But yeah, it's like the thing is like you might actually like it because the show is very anti-multiverse.
Okay.
Like the whole organization that Loki deals with in the show is like it's our job to make sure that there's no multiverse, so we keep this one timeline in check.
Okay, I don't hate that. I don't hate that as an idea.
The reason they have the Infinity Stones is when people have veered off that timeline, they have to extract them and they're done for.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like it's very interesting.
Okay, I promise I will give this show a chance.
Good, I'm glad. That's my one success. I want to talk real quick about Loki in God of War. Clam, you've played God of War, right?
I have, yes.
So all the things I've mentioned about the things I love about Loki, being this self-destructive character, being this narcissist. I did also want to mention though, like that's sort of the way the Loki in sort of modern tellings defines himself. I wouldn't say it's fair to put that same sort of trait on previous versions of Loki.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he does come off that way in a lot of things. But I sort of liked how like in the original Norse mythology that like Loki does stupid shit and people go, it's just in your nature. It's something about yourself you cannot change. It's who you are, which I thought is like a weirdly sort of wholesome thing, like about mental health, being like, you have these tendencies, you can work at them, but at a certain point, there's some things you won't be able to avoid without help because it's just who you are. Like, so you either have to change that aspect about yourself or you have to be okay with that's who you are. And some, for Loki, he's like, this is who I am. I'm a shit disturber. And it's because reasons this, why, and this, but I refuse to address those reasons. And so this is how I'll be, which probably isn't the most healthy stance if you're someone who feels similar. But I thought it was sort of cool that none of the other characters in the universe are like, there's something wrong with that guy. They're just like, that's just how he is. He's the god of mischief. That's what he does, which I thought was weirdly like tolerant or accepting for the times.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to God of War, the thing that now that I'm sort of coming to terms with the things I love about the representation of this character is that it is sort of like a self-inflicted thing. Whereas I feel like Atreus and Loki in that story, all the things that have happened to him have been put upon him. Like he didn't ask for any of those things to happen to him. And the way he responds to them is how any child might. So I just wanted you guys' thoughts on like, do you think that character steps outside the bounds of what Loki is or has been?
I mean, I haven't like read any of the like, I don't know, vanilla mythology,
which is very scarce to be clear. Like there's it's just like Loki, you're the way you are. There's no like Loki is a flawed. It's just like that guy's a shit. Like, the poetic edit is very vague.
Right. And think just going back to something you said when I was talking about like Marvel being an adaptation, how like you've had so many, like there has been so many retellings of Norse mythology and so many different storytellers that have told Loki's story in many different ways. Like like you say, sometimes he's a Jotun, sometimes he's the adopted son of Odin, sometimes he's his blood brother. Like there's so many different ways of telling it. I think like the God of War game, this telling is like a brand new one, telling Loki's story from childhood. And I think it'd be really interesting to see how they sort of develop him into this character that we all know so well and has become like his main traits have become very, very recognizable through Marvel. Right.
Yeah.
So like I'm curious to see how they'll develop him into that character, or if they even will try, or if they'll like take it in a completely different direction. But for now, it definitely does not feel like, he does not feel like a mischievous sort of, feels like almost like a petulant child sort of like coming to terms with who he is, because he doesn't even know what he is, and then like he reacts to finding out the way any child would. So it doesn't really have any of the traits that we'd associate with like the character Loki that we know.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. That's and I think it has to do with like the way that they were telling that story of kind of like keeping that like till the last beat of like the reveal of who Atreus is. So yeah, I feel like in Ragnarok a little bit we'll start to see a little bit more of the stereotypical Loki kind of characteristics. Yeah, there's definitely some points where like going back and like thinking of playing the game, like he did kind of like, he would always kind of step into other people's like business and things like that. Like all of the side quests are just like, it's Loki. Yeah, he's kind of like, oh, hey, like we should help this person out kind of thing. So it's, I see like some of the similarities now that like we're talking about it with that. Yeah, just kind of like he would step in and yeah, after he finds out that he's the child of a god, he kind of gets that like big-headedness of being like, we're gods, we can do whatever we want. Like,
right,
there's nothing that's going to happen. So like there are some moments in the game where you're kind of like, oh, this kid's a little shit.
Yeah.
And then yeah, you find out why he's the little shit that he is.
Yeah.
I'm curious if they'll like age him up for Ragnarok, or if it'll just be like a direct continuation. I don't know. Has there been any reveals, trailers? I've been paying zero attention.
Yeah, we did a trailer review a few months ago. But yeah, he seems to be older. I think there's a new voice actor as well. So
okay.
Oh really? Oh, I thought it was the same kid. It's just been 5 years since that first game came out.
Oh, it very well could be. Damn, that kid's voice dropped, man.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Oh, the one thing I mentioned this when we did the trailer review. There, like you're saying, how he gets coiled up in other people's issues, and that's like the side quest of the game. There's a character like I think it's called the Revenant, is one of the enemies, like the witch sort of throw poison at you type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the ones you have to find the bones of Gulvig.
Yeah.
And when you do, she comes back alive. Which tries to kill you. Kratos goes, I told you, don't help people.
Mm-hmm.
But Gulvig is also one of the alternate names for Angrboda. So like and the way the cycle of Ragnarok sort of works, where people get hit so hard with hammers they go back in time. Just like I can't wait. I'm hoping that the reason why Loki felt so inclined to help is because he does have a relationship with Angrboda in the past, future thing,
Time,
yeah. So maybe he felt drawn to that version of her.
That would be interesting.
Yeah. Anyways, that'll do it for Loki talk and for the podcast. Cam, thanks for coming back on.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's always great.
And we'll see you soon to talk about Kith and Kin on this Marvel full episode of the Lords of Lore podcast. Oh, it's funny how that worked out. Remember, you can catch by the time this is coming out, episode 6 of Wheel of Time this Saturday at some point, maybe in the later afternoon, actually this week. And keep a lookout. This show is every Tuesday, and then you can find the clip outs of the show the following Wednesday. Look out for Ruminations, which is coming, and obviously our Lords of Lore Adventures, which we'll have to get together and do the next episode of pretty soon here. run by the fantastic Cam. As always, I am Matt.
I'm Luka.
And I'm Cam.
We are the Lords of Lore.
Nice.